Chopper is one of the most recognizable motorcycles in cinematic history. But behind its star-spangled glory lies a tangled web of theft, betrayal, and controversy that's almost as wild as the film itself. From civil rights activists shot at in Alabama to disputed authenticity battles worth millions, the bike's real story involves stolen choppers, broken ribs, and creators erased from history. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Easy Rider's 1969 Harley-Davidson chopper, Captain America. Fact 1. Built by erased civil rights activists. When you think of Easy Rider's iconic Captain America chopper, you probably picture Peter Fonda cruising across the American Southwest on that star-spangled machine. But what most people don't know is that the bike was actually designed by a black civil rights activist who was deliberately erased from the film's history. Clifford Voss, an African-American filmmaker and motorcycle builder, was the creative mind behind both the Captain America and Billy choppers that became symbols of 1960s counterculture, yet his name appears nowhere in the movie's credits due to a controversial legal settlement. Voss wasn't just any bike builder, he was a field coordinator for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and he had ridden his own custom chopper through the Deep South during the violent civil rights demonstrations of 1963 through 1965. His real-life experiences directly inspired the film's story, including a terrifying incident where two duck hunters in a pickup truck actually shot at him while he was riding his chopper with a passenger between Jackson, Mississippi and Little Rock, Arkansas. When Voss met Peter Fonda in 1967 while working as a radio reporter covering Fonda's marijuana arrest, the two bonded over their shared love of motorcycles, and Fonda introduced Voss to Dennis Hopper, which led to Voss joining the project as associate producer. Voss purchased 4 Harley-Davidson Panhead motorcycles at a Los Angeles County Sheriff's auction and coordinated with motorcycle shop owner Ben Hardy and mechanic Larry Marcus to create the legendary choppers. But after a chaotic shoot at Mardi Gras in New Orleans, first-time director Dennis Hopper burned through the budget quickly, and when Columbia Pictures stepped in to finish the film, they fired Voss along with most of the original crew. As part of his legal settlement for leaving as associate producer, Voss' contribution to the film, including the creation of the most famous motorcycles in cinema history, was completely removed from the credits. Fact 2. 4 bikes purchased for just $500. The motorcycles that would become the most famous choppers in film history started their journey as retired police bikes bought for an astonishingly low price at a government auction. The entire fleet of 4 Harley-Davidson motorcycles used in Easy Rider, 2 versions of the Captain America bike, and 2 versions of the Billy bike were purchased for a combined total of just $500, which would be equivalent to approximately $4,700 in today's money. This bargain basement price tag seems almost impossible when you consider that one of these bikes would later sell at auction for over $1 million. The motorcycles were 1949, 1950, and 1952 Harley-Davidson FL Hydra-Glide models that had served as Los Angeles Police Department patrol bikes before being retired and sent to auction. Clifford Voss bought them at an LA County Sheriff's auction specifically for the film project, and these former police motorcycles were then completely transformed by Voss, Ben Hardy, and Larry Marcus into the radical custom choppers that would define the movie's visual style. The bikes were stripped down to their bare essentials, with most of the original police equipment and standard motorcycle parts removed or heavily modified. The transformation process was extensive and required significant customization work, as the builders needed to create 2 distinct styles: the flashy, patriotic Captain America chopper with its stretched out front end and chrome finish, and the more understated Billy bike with its different aesthetic. What's particularly interesting is that the production needed backup versions of each motorcycle to ensure filming could continue if one of the old machines broke down or got damaged accidentally during the shoot, which was a smart decision, considering they were working with decades-old motorcycles that had already seen plenty of hard use during their time in police service. Fact 3. 3 bikes stolen at gunpoint. One of the most mysterious and frustrating chapters in the Captain America saga is the disappearance of 3 of the 4 motorcycles immediately after filming wrapped, and according to legend, they were stolen at gunpoint in what remains one of Hollywood's most intriguing unsolved thefts. The remaining 3 bikes, 1 Captain America and both Billy bikes, were allegedly taken from stuntman Tex Hall right after production ended, and despite more than 50 years passing since the theft, none of these motorcycles have ever been recovered or definitively identified. The only bike that escaped the robbery was the Captain America stunt bike that had been crashed and partially destroyed during the filming of the movie's explosive finale. The most persistent rumor surrounding the theft is that members of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club were responsible for stealing the bikes, and some people believe the stolen choppers may still be sitting in a clubhouse somewhere, possibly in Oakland, California. However, no former club insiders have ever confirmed this story publicly, which seems strange considering that after more than 5 decades, you would think someone would have come forward, since there's no real legal threat at this point. The theft happened before anyone realized just how culturally significant these motorcycles would become, so it's likely that whoever took them either broke them down for parts without understanding their value, or they're being kept hidden by collectors who know they can never openly display them. Peter Fonda was reportedly furious about the theft because he had wanted to keep the bikes for publicity purposes and as personal mementos of the film, but the Captain America that was stolen was actually the one he had ridden most during filming, which means the true original hero bike, the one seen in most of the movie's iconic riding scenes, has been lost to history and may never be found. Fact 4. The final campfire scene. Shot without bikes. The most famous line in Easy Rider, when Wyatt looks into the campfire and tells Billy we blew it, was almost never filmed at all, and the scene had to be shot weeks after the production wrapped because Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda completely forgot to include it in their shooting schedule. This production oversight explains one of the movie's subtle visual inconsistencies that attentive viewers might notice, which is that the iconic Captain America and Billy bikes are nowhere to be seen in the background of this crucial final campfire scene, even though the motorcycles are clearly visible behind the characters in all the other campfire sequences throughout the film. After Hopper and Fonda hosted a wrap party to celebrate finishing the movie, they suddenly realized they had forgotten to shoot the second campfire scene where Wyatt delivers his enigmatic statement about blowing it, which foreshadows the film's tragic ending and has been debated by audiences for decades. By this point, however, the 3 remaining motorcycles had already been stolen, so the filmmakers had no choice but to shoot the scene without them. Peter Fonda later explained that they assembled the crew and went into the Santa Monica Mountains to film the sequence, and he specifically noted that if you don't like the scene, you can't see the difference in location, so they told themselves they were in Florida, even though they were clearly shooting much closer to Los Angeles. The scene also became the subject of creative disagreements between Hopper and Fonda, as Hopper wanted Fonda to deliver a lengthy speech about blowing their inheritance and messing up their heritage, but Fonda preferred to mumble the line in a more understated way, inspired by Warren Beatty's acting style, and Hopper eventually agreed once they filmed it and saw how effective the minimalist approach worked on screen. Fact 5. Dennis Hopper's 220-minute cut, disaster. Dennis Hopper's first attempt at editing Easy Rider was an absolutely disastrous version that ran 220 minutes long and was heavily inspired by Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey, complete with extensive flash-forward sequences that inserted scenes from later in the movie into the current action throughout the film. The editing process took Hopper 22 weeks to complete, but what he delivered was nearly 4 hours of footage that was completely unwatchable, and the situation was made even worse by the fact that Hopper fundamentally misunderstood how film editing actually worked due to his outdated knowledge of splicing techniques. According to producer Bill Hayward, Hopper's knowledge of editing came from the old days of hot splicing, which was a technique where you cut into a frame every time you made a splice, permanently losing that frame in the process. However, by the 1960s, film editors had developed butt splicing, which allowed you to cut between frames without destroying anything, meaning you could easily put scenes back together if you changed your mind. Hopper apparently believed that once you made a cut, you couldn't put anything back, so he absolutely refused to remove any footage from his cut. and when Hayward asked him to take out a scene with the promise that they could stick it back in if they hated the result, Hopper just stared at him blankly because he genuinely didn't understand that was possible. The situation became so dire that producers Bert Schneider and Bob Rafelson essentially sent Hopper and his girlfriend on a vacation to Taos, New Mexico, and brought in editor Henry Jaglom, along with Jack Nicholson and others, to rescue the film and cut it down to a manageable 96 minutes. When Hopper finally saw what they had done, he initially complained that they had turned his movie into a television show. But he eventually came around and admitted that Jaglom had actually crafted the film the way Hopper had originally intended. Fact 6. Jack Nicholson broke Peter Fonda's rib. The Captain America chopper was notoriously difficult and dangerous to ride, and this became painfully clear during filming when Jack Nicholson accidentally broke one of Peter Fonda's ribs while riding as a passenger on the back of the motorcycle. The bike's extreme customization made it incredibly unstable, and writers described it as squirrely, which meant it was unpredictable and hard to control, especially at higher speeds or when carrying the extra weight of a second person. The chopper's stretched out front end, raked frame, and lack of a front brake all contributed to making it a challenging machine that required serious skill to handle safely. During one of the scenes where Nicholson's character, George Hansen, rides behind Fonda's Wyatt on the Captain America, Nicholson was trying to balance himself on the wildly unstable motorcycle and instinctively squeezed his knees tightly against Fonda's sides to keep from falling off or shifting his weight too much. Unfortunately, Nicholson squeezed so hard that he actually cracked one of Fonda's ribs, causing genuine injury during what was supposed to be a routine riding scene. This incident highlights just how genuinely dangerous the Captain America was to operate, and it's remarkable that the production didn't experience even more serious accidents given the motorcycle's inherent instability. The design choices that made the Captain America so iconic on screen, the extremely long front forks, the high handlebars, the stripped down frame without safety features, were the same elements that made it a nightmare to actually ride in real-world conditions. Peter Fonda was an experienced and skilled motorcyclist, which is the only reason he could handle the bike at all, while Dennis Hopper's Billy bike was deliberately designed to be much more conservative and easier to control because Hopper didn't have the same level of riding expertise that Fonda possessed. Fact 7. Dan Haggerty. Authenticated multiple original bikes. The authenticity of any Captain America bike claiming to be an original from Easy Rider is deeply questionable, largely because actor Dan Haggerty, who became famous playing Grizzly Adams on television, sold and authenticated at least 2 completely different motorcycles as the original Captain America over the years, creating a tangled web of conflicting claims and legal battles. Haggerty had a small role in Easy Rider and helped with the bikes during production, and after filming Wrapped, Peter Fonda gave him the remains of the crashed Captain America stunt bike as a gift, which Haggerty claimed he kept untouched in his garage for 20 years before having it restored. In 1996, Haggerty sold one Captain America bike to a Texas man named Gordon Granger for $63,500, and he authenticated this bike with signed affidavits claiming it was the original, stating it consisted of 90% original parts. However, in 2002, Haggerty sold a completely different Captain America chopper to John Parham, the president of J&P Cycles, and again authenticated this second bike based on a new story about its origins, with Peter Fonda also giving his endorsement based on what Haggerty told him. Years later, Haggerty even signed a letter stating that Granger had the original bike, but then called that letter an honest mistake when questioned about the contradiction. The situation became even more bizarre in 2014 when the bike owned by collector Michael Eisenberg went up for auction, with Haggerty initially providing authentication before later withdrawing it amid controversy. To prove his credibility, Haggerty passed 3 separate polygraph tests that fall, but the damage was already done to his reputation. The confusion was compounded by Haggerty's history of drug abuse and his conviction for cocaine dealing and tax evasion, which made him an unreliable source despite his close connection to the original production. Fact 8. The $1.35 million sale may not have happened. One of the most widely reported facts about the Captain America chopper is that it sold at auction in October 2014 for $1.35 million, which would have made it the most expensive motorcycle ever sold at that time, but the actual details of this sale remain murky, and the reported price has never been independently confirmed. The auction was conducted by Profiles in History, a Calabasas, California-based auction house that specializes in Hollywood memorabilia, and while they announced the sale at that record-breaking price, multiple sources have questioned whether the transaction actually went through as reported. According to owner Michael Eisenberg, the auction company took months after the supposed sale to actually procure a buyer for the bike, which suggests the initial winning bid may have fallen through or never been legitimate in the first place. No details about the actual final sale price were ever publicly reported, and the identity of the buyer remained a complete mystery for years, with the auction house refusing to provide any information beyond repeatedly stating that the bike had sold for the headline-grabbing figure. When pressed by journalists about whether the sale had actually been finalized, a spokeswoman for Profiles in History would only send a press release from October proclaiming the $1.35 million sale and insist that it had been printed in the Los Angeles Times, which didn't actually answer the question. The entire auction was surrounded by legal disputes and authenticity challenges, with both Gordon Granger and Michael Eisenberg claiming their respective bikes were the real Captain America, and Peter Fonda himself calling the situation embarrassing and infuriating before the auction took place. The controversy became so intense that when asked about the competing claims, motorcycle historian Paul Dorleans stated that even in the best-case scenario, buyers were purchasing the stunt bike's blown-up frame rather than anything close to a complete original motorcycle. Fact 9. Microsoft's Paul Allen owned the real one. While multiple Captain America bikes have been sold and disputed over the decades, according to the National Motorcycle Museum, the most authentic version of the iconic chopper quietly ended up in the private collection of Paul Allen, the